Today's topic, Don't Underestimate the Future of Artificial Intelligence, will be presented by Dave Todaro, CEO of Ascendle. Today we are joined by Jason Kroll, a managing partner of Bank W Staffing. Hey there, Jason.
Hi.
We're honored to partner with Jason on this webinar. Jason, why don't you take a few minutes to tell us about Bank W Staffing?
Sure, thank you so much. First, obviously, I want to thank everyone for joining today. The Bank W Speaker Series has taken on really a new importance with us as people have been working more remotely. We've seen attendance rise dramatically over the last 3 to 4 months for a lot of these events as people want to stay more connected to their colleagues. So it's a great opportunity, and we're really happy to put it on. Just real quick about Bank W Staffing, our firms are really made up of 5 regional staffing firms. KBW, Financial Staffing and Recruiting, Alexander Technology Group, the Negla Group, Sales Search Partners, and KNF&T. We specialize in placing professionals in accounting and finance, information technology, administrative, HR, and legal, and sales. And we provide those services on a temporary consulting and permanent placement basis. I'm very happy to introduce Dave Todaro from Ascendle. Dave is going to help us break down both how AI is going to affect business going forward, and also how to identify if a product is actually using AI and machine learning. We're very excited to hear what he has to say. And with that, please welcome Dave Todaro.
Thanks so much, Jason. I appreciate it. And here I am. This is the heavily photoshopped version of me. You guys can see the live thing here in your video. As Jason mentioned, founder and CEO of Ascendle. Just real briefly about us, just so you can kind of know where I'm coming from. We're a professional services firm specializing in software development. Web development, apps, platforms is really what we're doing a lot of today, to include AI. And we also do product strategy, product design. And our clients have asked us to help train their teams to deliver like we can. So we also do agile training and coaching. We work with all kinds of clients, from the biggest of the biggest to the smallest pre-revenue startups. And I took a couple of years and I wrote down everything that I learned over the last 35 years or so. If you want to know how we do it, pick up this 500-page book and follow it step by step, and you can figure out exactly how we deliver the results we do. So before I dive in, let's take a look at the poll results here. So let me go ahead and end the polling, and that should pop up on your screen. So excellent. Well, it looks like quite a few people are diving into AI. About 7% have gotten all the way into production. And the rest of us are sort of in the researching and experimenting mode. We're not quite getting in there yet. So excellent. So this is, I think, going to be great timing for all of you to learn a little bit more about sort of the current state of the world in terms of AI. If you guys want to see these poll results, they'll be available throughout the presentation. If you close the window, just click poll down at the bottom and it will pop back up. So diving into today, so AI, for many years, this is sort of the picture that we had about AI, right? We had robots and androids and all kinds of things from the movies. And today, it's really becoming a reality. In fact, I think all of us are probably using more AI than we might even realize we're using. But what is AI? As Jason was saying, someone was saying they were using AI and he said, well, I did this on a spreadsheet 20 years ago. I'm not sure if that's really AI. So what is it? So there's this definition, which is AI is a system's ability to correctly interpret external data, learn from the data, and then use those learnings to achieve specific goals and tasks through flexible adaptation. And this kind of talks about the idea that when I write some code, the code just kind of stays. That's the behavior of the code. But what's really interesting about AI is that it becomes better over time. So I can start at position A, and then as we go forward, we can get better and better, and the machine actually continues to learn. And that's great, but what exactly does that mean for me? It's all a little bit fuzzy in terms of, how does this fit in? What can I use? What could I not use? So it definitely, brings some questions to mind. Like Jason and I were talking about at the beginning, what is AI versus just an algorithm that's pretty fancy and maybe it seems like AI, but not really. What services are available today? And as you'll see, as I get into this? The answer is quite a few. How do I know which services to use? And then how exactly do I come up to speed? How do I get going on an AI project so that we can start leveraging it internally? So first, I thought I would talk about this first question, the AI versus a clever algorithm, because I think that's really the foundation of, well, what's new and different. We've obviously had the ability to create pretty sophisticated programs over the years, and that's not really new, but an AI has actually been around for a long time. And those of you who remember Deep Blue and the chess, human versus machine chess tournament and all that, those were sort of the beginnings of AI, even before that in the 50s. But what's different today is that it's really becoming a lot more mainstream and accessible. By accessible, I mean I, as a developer, can sit down and leverage pre-built AI functionality, and I don't need to be someone who's studied AI for the last 25 years. So algorithm or AI, I have an input, I have an output. And then when we talk about what happens between, the super technical term for that is magic stuff. So a bunch of stuff happens between the input and the output. And the difference is that an algorithm is that I'm going to program for each of the situations that I expect to happen. If this, then that. If this happens, then this other thing. And then if this happens, then I do this other thing. And if. The difference between an algorithm and AI is that I'm going to get the AI started, but I don't know what that AI is going to see. And the magic here is that without knowing what it's going to see, it can actually take what I've trained it, take what it's learned, and sort of adapt and make things happen. And that's what's so exciting about this. Anyone who's a developer can tell you, we spend a whole lot of time thinking about every possible thing that can happen, every possible thing the user can do. And inevitably, we miss something. We screw something up. We miss some sort of scenario. And it becomes sort of bound in a box, right? I build a box this big. This is the only capability that will ever exist when I write this code and write this algorithm. But with the AI, again, it starts here, and it is, I wouldn't say unlimited, but within the bounds of what it's been trained to do, it's extraordinarily flexible and extraordinarily capable. So let me show you a really quick example just to illustrate the difference. So we've all seen the chat bot, right? The chat pops up in the corner of the window when I'm on my website. Hey, how can I help you out? And I'm going to contrast the algorithm-based chatbot versus an AI-based chatbot. So, hi, how can I help you? And you can do these two things. And these are the two things that I've anticipated you might do. And if you don't do these two things, it can be a problem. So if I just come along and say, well, I didn't even read that. I just got to how can I help you? And I'm going to type in, where's my refund? And it's going to say, I can't do that. I don't know what the heck you're talking about. I need to know one of these two things, order status or return items. And you say, well, I don't want that. I just want to know how to get my money back. And again, it says, I'm sorry, I don't understand. And here you're pulling your hair out saying, this is useless. Close the browser. And you're probably pretty fed up with that company. So let's look at how that works in an AI-driven system. So we're going to start pretty much the same way, but this is where the difference happens. The AI actually understands what I'm talking about based on how it's been trained, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So it says, okay, well, let me figure that out. And I found some information. And not only did I find information, I'm going to say it back to you in the context that based on the way you ask that question, it's the context in which I think you're going to best understand it and best appreciate it. We're processing your refund. You should expect it in 2 days. And by the way, I realized that it was put on your Visa card. That's not really magical. I can look up what kind of payment method was used. But this is great. It gave me exactly what I want. And now a big thumbs up. So you can see, from a customer-driven perspective, this sort of contrast is pretty stark. Now, those of us today who have been using a smartphone in the last 5 to 10 years, we're pretty used to this, right? So that's what I said earlier, where all of us are using AI throughout just about every day. whether it's the Alexa sitting in the kitchen, or it's Siri on my phone, or whatever else it might be, whether it's Google giving me suggestions of what it thinks I might want to be looking up. All of that is driven by AI. So we're a little bit spoiled today. I think the gap is, well, how do I take all of that stuff that I see, and how can I make that happen for myself without spending the tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars that all these big companies have spent developing their own AI. So before I get into that, let me just talk about this concept, machine learning. You guys have probably heard about this. Machine learning is a subset of AI, and really the most popular AI flavor, so to speak, today. It's really what's driving the majority of the AI, including that example I just showed you. And how machine learning works is, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to train it. You're actually going to feed the AI real world data, and it's then going to create a model, and then based on that model, it's going to execute and make decisions. And not only that, it's going to improve over time. So going back to that initial definition, the key difference between an algorithm and AI is that it can continue to improve over time. So I kind of think about it as, I'm just going to give it a shove and get it started, and then it's going to continue on from there. And it's not perfect. You'll see in a lot of AI contexts, you might see a feedback, did our AI get this right? And you might say, no, it totally blew it. That's part of its learning process. So in that case, it's a human helping to improve the model, but that's part of it learning all the time, is sort of course correcting and getting better and better. So let's look at a few examples. So the first one, anyone who has an iPhone is probably familiar with this, if you have an iPhone from recent years. So this is the Face ID feature. And as you can see here, the screenshot, move your head slowly to complete the circle. This is training. You're training the AI. And what it's doing behind the scenes is it's creating a model. So it asks you a few times, move your head and slowly to complete the circle, and then do it again. And it's reading your features and it's storing that model. And in fact, under the covers, it does improve over time. So if you dig in a little bit in terms of how this actually works, it is AI driven and it is improving over time. And in fact, it's so good. I was doing a little bit of research for this presentation. It can discriminate between identical twins. So your twin sister can't pick up your phone and get into all your business. It's just that smart. So that's kind of a classic machine learning example. I'm going to look at some sort of imagery. I'm going to build a model, and then I'm going to use that to recognize imagery. And you'll see that that example will repeat here. So another example is Yelp. So Yelp has tens of millions of images uploaded every day. If you're not familiar with Yelp, it has restaurant reviews, pictures from the restaurant that are uploaded by users, menus, etc. So tens of millions of pictures being uploaded. The Yelp staff can't keep up, but we do want to have the pictures categorized so I know where in the UI I want to be able to display those pictures. So what the AI is doing is it's looking at each of those pictures that it's never seen before, and using the model that's been created by the developers that train the model by showing it, here's some pictures of food, here's some pictures of drinks, here's inside, here's outside, here's a menu. The AI has actually learned to discriminate between those different types of images. And again, this isn't perfect. If you go on Yelp, there's a feedback option where you can say, this is miscategorized. And it'll say, okay, sorry, because it's not quite perfect, but again, it gets better all the time. Now, in the world of programming, this would be an extraordinarily difficult problem to create with just an algorithm. How do I define, for example, what does a drink look like? I mean, a drink could be something like this that, maybe I could program a glass of beer, a pint of beer. But what if I have a picture of a table that just shows a bunch of drinks, and there's martini glasses and wine glasses and beer glasses? That would be extraordinarily difficult for me to handle. But I can show the AI these examples and it'll figure it out. And it's pretty amazing how it works. I really like this example with imagery because it's sort of a really stark example of just how great AI can be and solving a real pain in the butt problem that before you had this capability, really only humans could do. So here's another interesting one. Netflix is using AI to actually improve the streaming performance. And the way they put it is, how can I look at the streaming performance for you in the last 15 minutes and using AI and a predictive algorithm, how can I predict how that streaming will be in the next 15 minutes? And what it does is it uses that to scale things behind the scenes. So it knows that, all right, in about 3 minutes, you're going to have a problem if I keep the video at this level of quality. So the Netflix AI is actually going to scale back the video quality slightly so that you continue to get a good experience. The worst possible experience you can have when you're watching a show and a movie is it just stops dead in its tracks. I can't get any further. And so that was a really interesting thing here. And by the way, at the bottom rather of each of these slides, I've included a link to some relevant information. So when you download the PDF, feel free to dig in, read how these companies are using AI, and maybe that will spark some creativity on your end. So that was super interesting. One point that they made is that they have a huge user base that's outside the US and all kinds of different bandwidth, from the best of the best to not so great. And they want to deliver a consistently good user experience across all of those. So some of you may have seen an email like this. This is an email from my inbox a couple weeks ago. This is an AI-driven fraud detection program. So Chase, you'll get these every once in a while. Did you make this charge? Because what it's doing is it's studying the history of my charges, and it's doing what's called anomaly detection. I detected something weird, and I'm going to flag this, and that anomaly detection is what's driving this fraud detection. So no human had to look through my charges and say, huh, that looks a little bit weird. I think I'm going to send Dave an email. The AI automatically kept watch on my account, plus the however many hundreds of millions of other accounts that Chase has, and drives this, which is really pretty big ROI, right? Because if I've got a fraudulent charge and I call up the credit card company, they're typically going to eat it, right? They're not going to say to me, well, too bad, your card number got stolen, I'm going to make you pay for all that stuff. So it's a huge exposure here. If they can leverage this AI like they have been doing, I mean, this is something that's likely saving them, I don't know how much, hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So yet another example of a real world AI application. This next one is really interesting. So what this is doing is it is looking at an avocado and using the video processing and the AI model, it's actually determining the quality of the avocado. So you can imagine that this is an avocado conveyor belt. And previously, you probably may have seen the videos of all the humans looking at the avocados and no, that one's no good, that one's no good, that one's no good. So this AI is using the model to detect whether or not it's quality food. The other application from this company is counting strawberries, for example, going over the conveyor belt. It's another great practical use of AI that otherwise is extraordinarily difficult to program with an algorithm. So those are some great examples. The really good news is that a lot of the work has been done for us. It's really a great time to be getting into AI because, as you'll see, the rest of this presentation is going to look like a little bit of a commercial. And that's actually by design. I want to show you guys just how much stuff is out there. And I'm just going to be covering a couple of the major cloud vendors. But these folks have been spending hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, in developing all of this technology. And the great news for us is we can just use it. Of course, what's in it for them? Well, we got to pay to use it. So we're going to add another subscription to AWS or Azure, and we're going to be dinged month to month. but trust me, it's definitely better than spending our own millions, if not tens of millions of dollars to develop this all on our own. So with that, let me get into the advertising section. I don't get paid by AWS or Azure, but I just wanted to give you guys a sample of what's out there. So let's just start with AWS. And what I like about this, and I'll talk a little bit more about this at the end, what I like about this is by kind of shopping these services, by looking at what's out there, at least for me, it gets the creative juices flowing. So that's a capability that exists out of the box. Now I can start imagining, well, what product could I build around that capability? Now, certainly you need to be careful not to go, having a solution in search of a problem. But at least for me, as I looked through these services, I thought, you know what? I could leverage that in a really creative way and in a way that my competitors aren't doing or my clients' competitors aren't doing for this product. So let's dive into it. So you'll see the first piece, and there's quite a bit of detail on these slides. I'm not going to read this. I'm hoping you don't need to read every word. I'll sort of summarize it. When you do get the PDF, you guys can kind of dissect it and read through it. But the first piece is that both AWS and Azure and the other vendors, they're going to have a way for you guys to build your own models and train them through machine learning. So that's sort of the fundamental piece. The other piece that you'll see is that they have built their own models that you can then just utilize. So this is sort of I've got a problem that isn't going to be solved by one of these out-of-the-box services. And I want to create and train my own AI model through machine learning. And then as you'll see, there's a whole bunch of canned services. So Amazon has all of these different tools. It's called SageMaker. Great, clever play on words. So SageMaker is Amazon's branding for their machine learning framework. But then they have all of these canned services, and they've got all kinds of clever names. I'll go through a few of these. So for example, text analytics, natural language processing. This is where it gets interesting for Jason. So, Jason might have a whole pile of data and he may start asking questions along the lines of, what's the most common technical expertise in these 50,000 resumes that otherwise, because each of those resumes is going to be structured a little bit differently, right? And I could do some sort of just text search, but when I do text analytics, I can start getting into more interesting and insightful things and actually asking questions in a human language. Going through my code and basically studying it. Another thing that is typically done by a human. I've done plenty of code reviews myself. Chatbots, this gets into the example that we talked about earlier, where you can build that agent that's not just, I know these two things. If you don't tell me these two things, you're out of luck, sorry. And on Amazon, this next few are interesting because they're extracting technology that they've been using at Amazon and now surfacing that and making it available to us. So being able to figure out demand forecasting. So I have a whole product catalog. I want to take all of my sales data over the past span of time, and I want to predict what's going to happen. For seasonal businesses, that could be extraordinarily interesting because now I can start figuring out how to order product just in time for the demand that this AI is going to predict for me. Document analysis, enterprise search. And we've had things like that. We've seen things like that, but this is something that you can then add to your data as well. Fraud prevention. So that's what we saw with the Chase email. I can add that capability to my platform by using this fraud detector technology. Image and video analysis, again, pretty common. Personalized recommendations. Again, if you're in retail or really any other customer-driven business, you can use this flavor AI to figure out, all right, how can I give the user what they actually want based on their behavior? Again, extraordinarily difficult to program just with an algorithmic approach. Translation and text-to-speech and transcription. These have existed over the years in various forms. Software to do this has been around, but this sort of breathes a new life into those sorts of technologies. and it's just a heck of a lot better. As you guys see, as you're using your smartphone, when you dictate text, it gets it pretty accurately correct, and it continues to learn based on what you're talking about. All right, let me move into Azure, just give you another flavor, and you'll see some similarities here. Azure has a lot more canned services that you can tap into. And the first thing, again, machine learning. That's going to be the foundation and core of any of these AI technologies that you tap into, which allows you to create something that's a little bit more freeform. Again, in contrast to the canned services. There's lots of canned services. They may not quite fit exactly what it is that I want to do. Next one is knowledge mining with what's called cognitive search. This is where it's going to take a bunch of data, and you can see there on the right, it's extracting texts, it's picking out faces from images, it's figuring out relationships, and then it gives you this ability to do sort of free form searches. And the AI is going to figure out, based on this free form text, what is it that you want? And then it's going to give it back to you. And then finally, cognitive services and the bot service. The bot service, like we had in the earlier example, this is a little illustration of a repair where I'm going to take a picture of my washing machine. The AI is going to recognize the machine, know what model it is, know what kind of repair to schedule, and then it's going to interactively allow me to schedule that appointment. And again, this isn't fantasy. You can use the services that are available today and do this. Does it require some coding? Yes. You don't get this out of the box that you can just drop in. I'm sure there's vendors out there that are using these cloud technologies and AI services to build these sorts of solutions. But for those of you who are looking to build solutions, again, the good news is you do need to write code, but that code is going to be limited to what you need to do for your business problem. All the smarts have already been built for you. There's a ton here. I'm not going to read through all of these. Before anomaly detector. So we talked about that. That's something you can use not only for fraud detection, but anything else that could have applications in industrial applications, chemical plants, anything where if you see some sort of spike, it's really expensive to have a human looking for those anomalies, where you could have the machine studying that data and looking for the anomalies. Q&A maker. So this is where you can use some AI to create that sort of interactive communication and conversation. Speech to text and text to speech. And this one's really interesting here. You can see some of these are brand new, still in preview, where it's actually recognizing who's talking. So it recognize, oh, that's Jason, or that's Di, or that's Dave. And some more of the usual suspects here, computer vision and custom vision. We took a look at some examples of that earlier. This one was really interesting as I'm thinking about this webinar and this recording. Wouldn't it be great if I could dump this webinar recording into something that would comb through all of it and create an index of each of the topics that I'm talking about? Again, it seems like it might be science fiction, but you can do that today. And then Azure provides all kinds of different web-enabled technology here, all with their Bing branding. But this is huge. You know, back over the last 20 or 30 years, as we built some of these capabilities into our apps, it was really a pain. We would download some sort of, you know, probably open source technology, and it would work okay, but it would be really difficult. For example, even spell check, kind of a simple problem. Having to build the technology to add words to the dictionary, and some of the packages were better than others as far as discriminating between similar words and that sort of thing. So all of these technologies are now backed by web technology, where in your application, it's going to, in real time, go out to the cloud and leverage these different services to get you a really good result. All right, so that's the end of the advertising for AWS and Azure. They probably should be giving me some sort of commission. How do we actually get started? What do I do now? Where do I go from here? Well, the first thing is I would, I would go ahead and quote unquote shop those services on the cloud platform that you're using. If you're using AWS or you're using Azure, I would just get into the website, get into some of that marketing material. You can click some of the links that I'll have in a subsequent slide, and just kind of look around and get a feel for what are these capabilities out of the box. Again, you can use that machine learning technology to build and train your own models, but if there's something that's available out of the box, that's going to save you a whole lot of time, effort, and energy. Then you can see, okay, well, how do these overlay against my business opportunities? What kind of juices get flowing as I look at those services? And I think, again, what can I do that's going to really bring me a notch up in terms of my customer experience? And what can I do that's going to be a differentiator between me and my competition? And then just experiment with it. So it may seem a little daunting at first, but if your developers are consuming any other type of web service, they can consume these AI services. So we've built some AI solutions super easy. It's just, all right, I drop this in, it tells me I got to send this information, this information, and this information, and then bang, it spits out the result, and I show the result on screen in my UI. So I'm a big fan of, read about it a little bit, but just start getting your hands dirty. Have your development team spend a little bit of time, carve off some time to just play. Just fool around with what's out there and then learn how to use it. And you'll get more competent with it. And then I would try picking off a very small problem that you want to solve for your customers and build it. So minimum viable product, very popular agile and lean term. What's the smallest possible thing I can do that's going to start delivering some value to my customers? And then I would go ahead and build that and then get it into production and then test how my customers react. Are they excited? If they're excited, why? And then what more do they want to see? Where do we want to go from here? If they're not excited, why are they not excited? And what do they say about that? Do they say, well, this is kind of neat, but what I'd really want is this. That would be awesome. And in fact, I just got an email today from a vendor. It's a vendor about online advertising. And so I have some advertising running for my book, pretty low cost, certainly not shipping my kids to college with my book sales. But I have a small ad campaign running, and there's a tool that I use to figure out how to drive those campaigns. And I got an email today, and they said, well, what more would you want? And I thought, well, I want an AI looking at my advertising and telling me how I'm doing and telling me what I should do to change it, or even better yet, just adjust it for me. So knowing my book, knowing my topic, I want the AI to read my book, and then I want it to look at my advertising, and I want to figure out how to improve it and do experiments and make that happen. That would get me really excited. So your challenge is figure out what would get your customers excited, especially as you learn about these capabilities. And you can start asking them, hey, we've got these 5 different ideas. We've built this one that we want to hand over to you and see what you guys think. But we've got these 5 other ideas. What do you think about that? Does that get you excited? Does that make you say, wow, the best thing you can hear from your customers, I didn't even know you guys could do that, and that would be amazing, right? And then you deliver that, and that's really going to drive your business forward. So I got a few references here, just high-level stuff, a lot of what I showed you today in that advertising section of the presentation, some links to learning. Azure, there's a ton of learning on Azure, a ton of learning on AWS. And again, I wouldn't get tied up in knots for months and months studying and studying. I would just get my fingers right into it, start getting your hands dirty, and just start building. Be like the little kid with a box of Legos. Just dive right in and start building, show it to your customers and see what they think. So that's all I have. So now we can shift into questions mode.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Dave. I found that really interesting. We do have some questions from the audience, and go ahead, and if you have been thinking of a question but you've been shy about putting it in the Q&A, why don't you go ahead and do it now? We'll stay on as long as it takes to get to all questions, but we understand if you need to drop off. You can go ahead and click on the like button to upvote a question if you want to make sure it gets answered. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll feed the questions to Dave. So the first one from Paul, what is the difference between AI and machine learning?
Yeah, that's a great question. So machine learning is a subset of AI. So AI, again, like that slide I had, AI is a little fuzzy. It depends on who you ask. And one off-the-cuff definition I read was something like, AI is anything that we haven't been able to do yet. So it's wide open. Go read your science fiction books and figure out what we haven't done yet, and that's AI. But again, machine learning, it's a subset of AI. Another term that you might hear is deep learning. Deep learning is actually a subset of machine learning. It starts getting into neural networks and things like that. So AI is really big. Machine learning and really what you're seeing for the most part in terms of on AWS and Azure and the like is going to be typically driven by machine learning. Now, those who have a degree in AI are probably going to rattle off all kinds of other things that AI capabilities exist today, but for us mere mortals, that's really where the target is right now.
All right, a question from Max. How do you manage the privacy considerations of these technologies? We have GDPR in Europe, CCPA in California.
Yeah, that's a real concern. All of us who are developing, we need to be cognizant of these privacy concerns. The privacy requirements don't go away, and it's really, I think, not dramatically different than your privacy requirements today. So for example, today I need to deal with GDPR, CCPA, et cetera. And all of these AI models, all of this training, you're going to use existing data to train those AI models. Or if you're doing data analysis and data extraction, you're diving into the data that you have today. So I think the real simple answer here is as long as you adhere to those requirements with your source data, the AI isn't going to inject any data. For example, if there's private information that's not in your source data, it's not going to inject that private information. Now, what you may need to do is make sure that you are shielding that AI's data set from anything that would then violate any of those concerns. So there may be some adjustment to the data that you might need to do, or at least adjustment to the modeling and the extraction of the data that you might need to do.
Great. From Larry, and I think he had posted this early on, when you say build a model, are you saying a data model?
So it's more than a data model. It's sort of the intersection. I'm going to think about the way I would explain it to myself. It's sort of like the intersection between an algorithm and a data model. So it's a sample set that says to the AI, this is how to recognize something that I want to do. So for example, going back to the Yelp example, I'm going to give the AI, here's a bunch of pictures of food, here's a bunch of pictures of drink, and here's a bunch of pictures of menu. And I'm going to tell you, food, drink, menu. And then the AI is going to say, got it. The model is essentially what it has built using its own internal algorithm. The billions of dollars that these cloud vendors have been spending is on building these algorithms that extracts that data and creates an internal model that it can then leverage to recognize the yet unseen thing that comes along. And again, that's the key thing here, is that the big power of AI is it's dealing with things that I don't know exist yet. I'm going to walk out, I'm going to go to my restaurant down the street, I'm going to take a picture of food. The AI has never seen that picture of food before, but because the food model has been trained to recognize food, it's going to do a comparison and say, I think that's food, because it doesn't look like drink, doesn't look like menu, doesn't look like interior, etc. And it's going to classify that. So it's maybe a data model on steroids. It's all data under the covers, but it's a data model that's specifically tuned for the AI to leverage as a reference and say, all right, I'm going to use that training and I'm going to recognize this, and I'm going to use my additional training as I go along, because each additional picture of food or drink or menu, that's going to add to that model and it's going to make the AI even more accurate.
Great. All right, from Spencer, are there training opportunities for developing with AI?
Absolutely. So even if you just go on AWS or you go on Azure or you just Google Azure AI, AWS AI, or AWS AI training, there's a ton of free stuff that each of those vendors has. And there's also a bunch of third-party training as well, and all different degrees of training, right down from sort of the raw data science of AI, how to build machine learning from scratch and how to train those models, et cetera, to training, which is just, I just want to use these off-the-shelf services, and how do I actually get those, how do I get started writing some code that's going to now tap into some of these pre-built services. So tons of free stuff out there. I haven't dug into things like Pluralsight and other vendors like that, but I'd be pretty shocked if they didn't have a bunch of courseware as well.
All right, we have one from Sam. If you have an existing software or app built in the AWS or Azure environments, how easy is it to add in one of the AI modules?
Yeah, that's what's great about this, is all of these canned, off-the-shelf services that I've been talking about, they're all exposed via REST API. So we actually built a project where we just extended the existing application. It was a web application. It happened to be in Azure. So we just added another Azure service. We're already using some Azure services. We just added another Azure service and we tapped right into it using the REST API. So if you've had the experience of building an application and then adding another web service, it's the same exact thing. It's just that you'll now read the documentation, figure out what that service needs to get started, and it's super easy to add. In some cases, if you're doing, for example, data mining, you're going to need to build some infrastructure, for example, in Azure or AWS, and use some tooling to get that data transferred into that repository, which the AI can then crank through. That's a little bit different than extending an app with one of these AI services. That's a little bit more of all right, I'm going to put some data over here, and then in my app, that's when I'm going to use the REST API to send that search engine some plain English queries, and then it's going to return back to me my results, which I can then show in my UI. But long and short of it is totally seamless. If you're already using AWS, adding it super easy. If you're already using Azure, adding it super easy. And same thing goes for other cloud platforms.
Great. All right, next one. What practical advice do you have for teams just getting started with AI?
Yeah, I think that, I'll go ahead and go to that previous slide. I think this is really the big one here, is to take a look around. I think that you definitely want to, I'm big on having everything driven by the business. So you definitely want to talk to some of your product folks about at least getting a direction, what kinds of things should we be digging into? And once you get some direction from the product team, then start fooling around. Now, depending on how your company is structured, your development team may already have enough context based on what's been asked for by the product team to sort of start digging in. But this is exactly what I would do, is make sure that I'm going to go in the right direction for things that my customers will actually, at least I think, appreciate. You don't really know until you get it in their hands, and then just start using it. If you have hackathons, this is a perfect time to dive into some AI stuff. If you have a company where our Friday afternoons, take Friday afternoons and just play around with new stuff, this is a great time to do that. And then you may end up coming up with some ideas and showing it to the product people, and they say, oh my God, this is ridiculous and awesome. Let me show this to some people and see what our customers think. So that's just diving right in. I'm sort of implying that as you're diving in, you're looking at the documentation as us developers do all the time. The number one skill for developers, Google and Stack Overflow. So same thing here. Get your hands dirty and start building stuff.
Great. All right, from John, what are the current trends of AI and machine learning in the field of robotics?
Yeah, this I did a little bit of research. Robotics isn't really my area of expertise, but I did a little bit of research into, and I'm going to butcher the name. Maybe someone can put in the chat window. Is it Boston Dynamics? You may have seen the video. It's the video of the sort of humanoid robot, like doing somersaults and jumping around and doing backflips. It's also, you've seen maybe seen the video of the robot dog, which either impresses or kind of disturbs some people, depending on who sees it. A little four-legged robot. Those are driven by AI. So if maybe someone can do a quick Google for me and see if I'm right in terms of Boston Dynamics. So that I think is sort of exemplary in terms of where robotics is going. Again, not my field of expertise, but that's what I've picked up over time here with oh, there you go. Good job, Matt. Appreciate it. Yeah, so Boston Dynamics, that's the perhaps slightly disturbing robot or very impressive robot, depending on your perspective. But pretty amazing, regardless of what you think about it. Pretty amazing stuff.
Max, thank you for your comment. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Max.
When is the right time to introduce AI into our technology plan?
So I think that AI today is no longer bleeding edge. So we typically steer our clients and our technology away from bleeding edge because it's just a little bit too risky. I mean, we may fiddle around with things in the bleeding edge, but AI today, particularly if you're using these canned services from major AI vendors or major cloud vendors, I think the answer is right now. Because if you're not starting to dive into it, your competitors probably are.
Great. How do we determine how AI will help our company?
Yeah, again, I think here, to sound like a broken record, go shopping. Sit down with your product folks and just look through those list of services that I have here collected in this PowerPoint. When you get the PDF, just comb through it and say, do any of these get you guys excited? Or again, the development team knowing what the customers might want. Hey, we've got these ideas. What do you think about these ideas? So you could go to the business leaders and say, we've got some of these ideas. Which one gets you excited? And 5 different ideas. And they may look at you and say, can you guys actually do this? And you say, yeah, absolutely, because we know that these things exist and we definitely can use them without going and doing 3 years of research. So I think that's what I would do is test some ideas internally, test some ideas with customers, and see what gets them excited.
From Larry, I suspect this is a very relative question, but what depth of an initial model needs to be developed?
Yeah, this I don't know because I believe it's based on the specific problem. So in total transparency, the AI work that we've been doing is more along the data mining. We haven't gotten into any sort of the like the image processing and image recognition and that sort of thing as far as consuming the web services. So that might be something where might need a little bit more research. And feel free if someone has more experience in terms of this model training and wants to pipe it in the chat window, go right ahead.
Will this recording be available to view at a later day?
Absolutely. Yep, we'll get this recording processed and edited, and next week we'll get it out to everyone who's on the webinar today.
Great. From Sean, in your opinion, what industries seem to be most vulnerable to major disruption as a result of rapid advancements being made with AI?
I think the big one here is anything that's, I would say, heavily customer driven and heavily experience driven. And a few come to mind. So retail, that's an easy one. Obviously, Amazon is setting the bar pretty high in terms of what they're doing with all the AI built into their platform. But if you think about retail, it's a lot of people. If you don't make them happy, you're dead. And you have a lot of products to figure out how to manage and what to surface to those users. So even something as simple as a small business that has a product line with 100 products. What if I could start surfacing the products that are more likely for my customers to buy when they log into my website? What would that do for my sales? Could it increase my sales 1%? What if it increased my sales 5%? What else could you do to increase your online sales 5% with every single customer? I mean, that would be pretty amazing. So that would be my knee-jerk reaction. And then other areas where I think AI can start to come into play is other heavily consumer-driven industries, whether it be entertainment, transportation, as transportation starts to pick back up again, et cetera. But I think retail is probably the low-hanging fruit.
What is deep learning?
So deep learning, so first of all, we've got AI, really big, kind of fuzzy. We've got machine learning, which is a subset of AI. And then we've got deep learning, which is a subset of machine learning. Essentially what deep learning does is it adds in to the mix from the highest level. This could probably be a whole other discussion. It adds in more smarts to that machine learning. And now it's going to actually end up using like a neural network to increase the learning capability. So AI being the sort of the biggest umbrella, machine learning under that, and deep learning being a subset of machine learning.
How much more processing power is needed for AI versus a traditional algorithm approach?
There's definitely more processing power and storage required. I don't know off the top of my head how much more, but there's definitely more going on there. Of course, with processing power and capabilities improving all the time, I imagine that that will be less of an issue as far as actual raw electrical power. But yes, it is more expensive in terms of processing power as far as compared to algorithm. But again, that's one nice thing about consuming these cloud services. That's Amazon's problem, or that's Microsoft's problem. They can figure that out. I'm just going to consume it and expect that it works.
Okay, next, do you have a lot of companies implementing machine learning / AI in the New England area?
Well, certainly in the Boston area, as I think lots of folks know, is a hotbed for innovation. We talked about Boston Dynamics. I think that's probably the most exciting and visible example that I've seen in the New England area. But all kinds of companies are diving into AI, whether it's sort of on the simpler end of things with the chatbot, or getting into the super complex, like the robotics folks at Boston Dynamics.
Okay, from Paul. Given a resume, I would like to assess the competencies of an employee that isn't explicitly expressed, but could lead to a position that is yet to be defined. Define the career path that could lead to personal fulfillment, and what would be the likely outcome of the person's career trajectory and the value derived. You were trying to stump me out with that question, I think, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably a great data mining example. I think you'd have to probably need to figure out, well, how do we put some sort of rules around that? Again, in the interest of giving some hints to the data mining AI. Can you do all of this out of the box? I don't know, but I think this will be a great thing to talk about. Paul, give us a call and we'll dive into it with you. And kidding aside, if you do want to talk about any sort of AI projects, that's what we do. We innovate typically at a rate that is going to be faster than your own teams can do. Usually it's because your own teams are busy trying to make your current customers happy. But the other thing is your team's ability to rapidly come up to speed with these new technologies. So anybody that needs some help with any new innovative idea, certainly give us a call.
All right. You attendees are awesome. These are the most questions I think we've had. So let's keep going.
This is great.
From Edian, this question is more about current application tools utilizing AI. What is the potential of AI in marketing? Are there such tools that are cost effective for new companies?
Yeah, I don't know the landscape as far as AI and marketing. One tool that we use with our marketing team is SEMrush. And I'm not sure if it's necessarily AI, but there is all kinds of automation, if you're familiar with the tool, but all kinds of automation that the tool gives us, and it sends us emails that says, by the way, I noticed this problem. You need to make this improvement. So I think that's on one end. I think probably the low-hanging fruit with marketing is probably on the chatbot end of things. So the chatbot examples I was showing were a little bit more customer service oriented. But in the business development, sales, and marketing end of things, being able to have a natural conversation with a visitor to your website and start steering them in the right direction based on the questions they're asking, I think that is a good low-hanging fruit. Now, there's tools out there such as Intercom and the other 2 or 3 popular chat tools. I haven't dug in. They do have algorithmic chat configuration. I haven't dug in at all to see if they have capabilities as far as AI. But that would be, I don't know the landscape enough to list off specific tools, but I think that is probably what I would start with. And then, of course, personalization is another great one as well. So when someone visits your website, based on their past behavior, you can start showing them content that is more likely to resonate with them. So your website actually looks different depending on who's visiting it. The very first time someone visits your website, it might look a certain way, but from that point, every single visitor has a different experience that's totally customized to them based on just cookie tracking on their browser and understanding what they've done in the past. So those are two that I think that I would look at: the natural language chatbot on the sort of demand generation side, and then personalized experience on the website. That's even before getting into like a product catalog or something like that.
Okay, we have a few more here. How will AI affect Microsoft Systems administrators currently managing the systems and network?
Well, the really great news here is that if you go from sort of a traditional Microsoft-based infrastructure and you move to Azure, it's still all Microsoft under the covers, right? What they're doing is they're just kind of putting a little veneer on top of the infrastructure, and it's still all running on various Microsoft tooling. Now, a lot of that tooling is brand new and created specifically for the needs of the cloud. But the good news is that it's not something where all of a sudden, if I'm a Microsoft system administrator, my job evaporates and I'm not needed anymore. You're absolutely necessary, because what developers are terrible at is managing all the infrastructure and keeping it working and keeping it fine-tuned, right? It's not that we can't do it, it's just we don't really want to. So moving from a sort of traditional systems administrator to more of a DevOps role, where you're kind of handling the care and feeding of all this cloud-based infrastructure, it's really a lateral move. So I would say if you're a Microsoft system administrator right now, just dive into that Azure training, maybe get some Azure certifications, and you're going to have growing demand, because every single company that goes onto Azure is going to need someone to manage that infrastructure. Just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be managed. So I think you would have a long and promising career as long as you work to increase your knowledge and skills and move into that cloud realm.
Great. Okay, getting down to the last few from Michael. Could you discuss the costs associated with a move to acquiring AI and somehow to prioritize which technologies are most important?
Sure. So two different answers here. One is off the shelf, buying an existing software package or subscribing to an existing software package that does what I need it to do. That's always going to be the least expensive option. If you have a product and you want to create a customized experience that's different than what your competitors have and different than what your competitors can get because you're going to build it, then you're getting into building software. So I think that, again, it depends, like anything, it depends on how much you build. But if you were to dip your toes in and let's just say, I want to add some AI into my current product, you're probably looking at a typical development effort that we would call a minimum viable product. For us, and this is very hand wavy, it's going to be different. Love to have a conversation with you about anything specific you have in mind. I can help you out with that. But we say, 13 to 16 weeks, and maybe call it, $200,000 to $300,000, something like that. That's going to get you into the AI mix, adding some capabilities to your product. And again, exactly how much stuff fits into that 13 to 16 weeks, that somewhat depends on your specific problem, but you're not talking 2 years and a couple $1 million. You're probably also not talking, 3 weeks and $30,000. So that would be my rough number. If someone came to me and asked that question, what would it cost me to kind of dip my toes in? Call it roughly a quarter and call it $200,000 to $300,000.
Okay, our last question. I'm a project manager working in IT and my company doesn't use any AI. I'm really excited to enter into an AI job. Where should I start?
I think, like I've mentioned, I think I would just start by learning. And I would start by just going, if you've got familiarity with AWS or if you have familiarity with Azure, I would just start there on their website. If you don't have familiarity with either of them, I would pick Azure simply because they have so many more canned services. I think that just makes me feel like there's more of a list of things I could kind of dive into and learn about. And I would just, this is me speaking, I would just spend time on the website, going through everything, making some notes, and then something that gets me excited, I would just build something on my own time. I would, even if I'm not a programmer, I would figure out how to get something basic working. And by the way, there's lots of tooling in these cloud environments that don't require programming. You can actually leverage these AI services without doing programming. You're going to use graphical tools, maybe to map some data. And it could be as simple as you're going to create a spreadsheet with a bunch of fake data, and you're going to upload it, and you're going to use some graphical tools. And then all of a sudden I can do some natural language searching on that. And it's done some real basic data mining for me. But you're doing AI. It doesn't matter how basic it is. And so that's a really important point. If you're an IT person without any programming skills, there's no reason you can't start diving in. And I think that, if I was hiring somebody for an AI job and they said, by the way, I've done a bunch of AI, and they start showing me the stuff that they've done, I'd say, well, shoot, what that means to me is A, you're motivated. B, you already have a lay of the land in terms of understanding what's going on in this world. And even though what you built might not be exactly what I need, you're going to hit the ground running, and that means it's going to cost me less. It's going to cost me less in terms of time. And of course, it's going to cost me less in terms of money because you can start producing value for me right away. So I hope that helps.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you to all the attendees. You really came up with some great questions. Really appreciate it. Makes it much more interesting when we can interact with our audience. Thank you, Dave, for the great presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, Jason, for hosting us, and thank you to Bank W Staffing.
Thank you, Dave, and the team from Ascendle. I have lots of things going through my head now, and based on the questions we got today, seems like a lot of folks do as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.